What's going on, guys? Welcome back to my Friday Night SmackDown audio review for April 14th, 2023. I am Graham G.S. Matthews. Hope you guys are doing well and having a great weekend so far. Not the show itself, but the date, April 14th, amazingly marked 15 years that I've been watching wrestling. That was the first full episode of Raw I believe that I watched. I had caught Raw before, didn't really hook me until I watched that April 14th show, specifically from the advertisements for a William Regal Randy Orton match, where Regal was the Raw GM at the time, Orton was the WWE champion at the time, had a non-title match in England, Regal's home, country, whatever. The match wasn't anything out of the ordinary. It was a 5-minute whatever. Match was over. I followed up the following week as Regal really caught my attention as a viewer. Saw him win the King of the Ring despite already being the Raw GM, getting power hungry and drunk with power and whatnot, and I've been hooked ever since. So I kind of commemorate that as my faniversary, so to speak, and now we're 15 years in. I appreciate all of you for the journey, being along for the journey, whether you're new, been along the entire time, for most of it, what have you. I appreciate you. So it was kind of cool commemorating the occasion by watching this show, enjoying this show, and also going back after SmackDown and going back and watching the first full episode of Raw I've ever seen back on April 14th. April 14, 2008, when I was on my April break. I think I was a 7th grader at that point, so time has flown by, and I'm very happy to have been, through everything that I have been in the last 15 years, the good, the bad, the ugly, everything else in between, and to be where we are right here, right now. So talking about SmackDown from last night, like I said, I thoroughly enjoyed this show. I thought last week's SmackDown was great. I thought even Raw on Monday this week was a vast improvement over that awful, disappointing show from the following week, or from the previous week, rather, the night after WrestleMania. Much better Raw this week, despite the travel issues. Might have actually helped the show, in retrospect. And SmackDown, I thought, was also quite a good show. So we do have a date for the draft, announced as of SmackDown last night. Part 1, as it has in the past, it's actually kicked off with Raw, and I think it's opened with SmackDown, right? I think it typically opens with SmackDown and is wrapped up on Raw. I thought in the past maybe it started on Raw, but then ended on SmackDown, but I think it actually starts on SmackDown and ends on Raw. I think that's the way that it's worked in the past. That's how it's going to work this year as well. It starts in 2 weeks. So 2 weeks from yesterday, on April 28th, the day of the actual draft, the NFL draft, the real draft. And then it wraps up that Monday on Raw, the final Raw before Backlash that weekend. So we have a lot to look forward to. I'll talk more about my draft moves, what I would do, how I would do it, and stuff like that. Not here today, but as we get closer. Maybe not on this show, but on Wrestle Rant Radio or on Hashtag and in other excerpts and stuff like that. So check that out as it gets closer. But like I said, I thoroughly enjoyed this show. So we opened up the episode with Kevin Owens, Sami Zayn in the ring addressing the Usos who came out. The two teams kind of going back and forth, talking about the Bloodline dissension. Oh, or Sami, are you going to turn on Kevin Owens the same way you turned on the Bloodline? Blah, blah, blah. Solo Sikoa came out with the Usos. Before they could attack Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn, Matt Riddle emerged from the audience and went after Solo Sikoa, helping to even the odds. Not only leading to a brawl between the two trios, but also setting up for the night's main event, Matt Riddle versus Solo Sikoa one-on-one. Now, I don't know if it was for the first time ever. I know was it Solo and Riddle? I don't remember. I know obviously Solo put Riddle on the shelf back in December. I thought that might have been following like a tag team match. I don't know if it was following a one-on-one match or not. I don't remember exactly. I just know, as they showed here, Solo put Riddle on the shelf by hitting that, the fucking ass splash. What do you call it? When the hip attack, I guess you would call it. Tony Storm does it too. In the corner on Riddle, with a chair wrapped around Riddle's head, putting Riddle on the shelf in storyline for 4 months. They said 3 on the show. It was actually 4. It was from early December to early April. So we had that as a main event on the show. I'm actually surprised they were not saving that for Backlash. But I think all signs point to a 6-man tag team match at the pay-per-view. And that's totally fine. That actually makes the most sense. I thought they might split it up and do Riddle versus Solo, and then Owens and Zayn versus the Usos in a rematch for the tag team titles. We're actually getting that rematch, as also announced on this show, in 2 weeks on SmackDown Draft Night. So a WrestleMania 39 Night 1 main event rematch on the draft edition of SmackDown in 2 weeks. That's a lot to look forward to, in addition to other matches set up for next week, which we'll get to soon enough. But that was the opening segment on the show. Speaking of rematches, we had LA Knight versus Xavier Woods. I thought this was an opportunity, and they set this up last week, which I forgot to mention in my review. But LA Knight interrupted Xavier Woods playing, I think it was 2K23 backstage, broke his controller, and that was the setup for this matchup. Hey, listen, if fucking Kurt Angle, I saw someone else say this on Twitter, but if Kurt Angle and Kane, or Booker T and Edge, rather, can feud over a fucking shampoo bottle commercial or whatever it was, and Kane and Jericho can feud over a spilled cup of coffee back in the day, what is stopping LA Knight and Xavier Woods from feuding over a broken Game Boy? I'm dating myself, and I play these new systems too. I sound like I'm in 2001. What's stopping them from feuding over a broken Xbox controller? Over a video game controller. So that was the setup for this matchup. Woods previously beat Knight about a month ago on SmackDown, and it made no fucking sense. And in retrospect, it still makes no fucking sense, because I'm thinking, oh, they're going to have LA Knight go on a losing streak. He comes out of WrestleMania, complains about his spot, not having a spot on the WrestleMania show, gets attacked, has an impromptu match. Not only did they not do that, but they also had LA Knight beat Rey Mysterio like the following week. So why have him lose to Xavier, who at that point was doing nothing, wasn't even at WrestleMania in any form or fashion, nor was LA Knight, and then have LA Knight break the streak the following week? It made no sense. So I thought this was his chance to get that win back here. It actually wasn't. Woods won the match. They had a really good match. Woods won. And I'm thinking, the fuck are they doing here? Why are they continuing we're out of WrestleMania season, all right? We're past WrestleMania. Why are they continuing to have this man, LA Knight, lose matches? It made no sense until I'm thinking, the only way I'm okay with this is if they're setting up Woods to challenge for the Intercontinental Championship. Because he said, previously on SmackDown and on Twitter and on social media, whatever, he's actually never before had a one-on-one opportunity for a singles championship in WWE. He's a former King of the Ring winner. He has faced singles champions. He faced John Cena, I think, for the United States Championship on Raw back in 2015. But at least for the Intercontinental Championship or the World title, he's never gotten any opportunity at either of those championships. That'll change next week. We found out after this match when Woods confronted Gunther backstage. That way I was okay with it. I'm like, all right, the win for Woods makes sense then. Woods beat Knight to kind of earn him an opportunity next week, not even in 2 weeks or at the pay-per-view. They're doing it next week. Woods and Gunther for the Intercontinental Championship. I like it a lot. It should be a good match. I don't think Woods will win. I don't think he should win. That should be a great match. Now, Sheamus was not on the show. I don't think they showed him in a backstage segment. He and the rest of the Brawling Brutes beat Imperium last week in a six-man tag team match. Now, Sheamus did not pin Gunther. I think he pinned Vinci, but he still picked up the win for his team. So that kind of left us wondering, all right, clearly, hopefully, depending on where the draft goes, they could very well and quite likely will end up on separate shows, which would be a fucking crime. Where do you go with Sheamus and Gunther as far as, do you do the rematch at Backlash? What I would do is, you had Sheamus win that match, but you go back to it at Money in the Bank. To wait until after Gunther breaks the record, I mean, I guess you could, but that's in fucking September. Who even cares? It doesn't even really matter. It's the only thing the Honky Tonk Man has going for him. Just let him keep the record. I wouldn't normally say that, but it doesn't even matter. That's in 5 months. Have Sheamus win it before then. He should have won it at WrestleMania realistically, but whatever. I would much prefer they do it probably in London on that Money in the Bank show in early July. So hopefully they end up on the same show coming out of the draft. If they're not, we have an unresolved rivalry there, and that's bullshit. We had Damian Priest one-on-one with Santos Escobar also on the show. Another really good match. I continue to say it, but I think Legado is really benefiting from this alliance with Rey Mysterio. Now, granted, they have not won a single fucking match with Rey Mysterio. Santos has lost at least 3 or 4 matches in a row. He continues to take the pin for his team. That's not good. But listen, they're getting over. The fact they're aligned with Rey at all is getting them more over now than they were as heels. And I think the right role for them is as heels at some point. But honestly, it might even play into the story, because you can say when the day comes where Santos turns on Rey and he betrays him and they have a whole feud, you can say, listen, ever since we joined forces, I've actually gone downhill as far as my wins and losses are concerned, and you weren't out there to help me win matches. So he can turn on Rey. That can be a whole SummerSlam feud or Mania feud for next year. That might be thinking too far ahead, but it's just an idea. Priest, as much as I love Santos and wanted Santos to pick up a win here, Priest needed this win. He also needs some rehabbing. He really hasn't won a lot of important matches lately. He won the match for his team on Monday's Raw, that tag team match. I think a guy, who did they face on Monday? I don't remember. But they had a match on Monday. Or no, did he? I don't even remember. Didn't him and Dominic have a match? I know Balor beat Rey. Maybe it was last week. I don't know. I remember Damian, maybe it was last week on SmackDown. That's probably what I'm thinking of. Yeah, it must have been him and Dominic against Legado. That's probably, because Damian wasn't even on Raw this week. That's what it was. It was last week on SmackDown. They need to build him up to make him feel more like a threat. So when he teams with Dominic at Backlash against Rey Mysterio and most likely Bad Bunny, the attack they've shown a million times on replay, he needs to feel more like a threat. So I'm honestly okay with that. We had the new WWE Women's Tag Team Champions out next. Raquel Rodriguez and Liv Morgan getting the pyro treatment, cutting a promo about winning the tag team titles. I was actually shocked they were out there. I'm thinking they win the tag titles. That wasn't even the primary focus of what happened on Monday. It was more so Trish turning on Becky. So I thought this was nice. They gave this focus. They actually set up their first title match for next week, them against Sonya and Chelsea. The segment itself wasn't really anything special. It was decent. It set up their first challengers. I'm curious how quickly they will run through this division. There really isn't much of a division to run through. I get it. I assume they're just having Liv and Raquel beat all the teams that are already existing on the main roster. They already beat Damage Control. They beat Becky and Lita on Raw, or Trish and Raw, I guess, on this past Monday. They beat them. They beat Shotzi and Natalya last week on SmackDown, and they're probably going to beat Sonya and Chelsea next week. The only team remaining, I think, is Ronda and Shayna, and they're probably going to lose the belt to them on the sooner side. So I kind of get the feeling I like Liv and Raquel as a team. They just kind of feel like transitional champions. Either that, that should be the end game of them winning the belts from Liv and Raquel. I just don't know if I would do it like soon. Ronda may not even be ready, first of all. Second of all, you really got to stretch this stuff out, because if you run through all the teams so quickly, there aren't many teams, and WWE does not care about this division. It doesn't matter what they tell you or what they do. They do not give a fuck about those titles. So they should at least attempt to by giving us more of a run for Raquel and Liv before they drop the titles, but I'm not too confident about that. But at least to set up a match for next week, it served its purpose. Shinsuke Nakamura back on SmackDown for the first time in 5 months, if you can believe it. The last time we saw Shinsuke on SmackDown, I think, was in a first-round match in the WWE World Cup, the SmackDown World Cup, where the winner earned that Intercontinental Championship opportunity, ultimately won by Ricochet. He lost in the first round to Santos Escobar. And I think I might have actually even been on at that show. I think I was at that show, either that week or the next week. I don't think I was there for... I don't remember. I'm not really sure, but because I was at a SmackDown in November. It might have been that show. I don't remember exactly. But we have not seen Shinsuke since then. Now, I don't know if that was a creative decision. I don't think he was hurt. I don't think it was a Shinsuke decision to stay off the show. They probably just didn't have anything for him. He did wrestle the Great Muta at that Wrestle One show, or Pro Wrestling Noah show, or whatever it was, back in January on New Year's Day, beating him. They didn't really capitalize off of it. Nakamura wasn't on the show at all. He was at the Hall of Fame when Muta got inducted 2 weeks ago. Finally caught up on that yesterday. Great ceremony. Loved the Conan induction speech for Rey. He was amazing. We haven't seen Nakamura in months, is the bottom line. He was back here. They gave him the full entrance this time. I feel like for the last 2 years, since he went back to being a babyface, they weren't giving him the full music. They just kind of went to the... I'm not going to sing the whole song, but they cut out the intro. Now, I could be wrong, and they were already doing that. I just don't remember. They brought it back here, though. He had a slightly different, like, black and white complexion for his gear. I thought that was cool. He beat Madcap Moss in like a minute or two. Madcap Moss was backstage beforehand talking with Emma. And Emma told him, you got to win this. We need this win. They should be cheering for you. So it looks like he's going heel. He attacked Nakamura following the loss, which is the right role for him. Moss, I think, is decent. But I've always said this, he comes across like a fucking caw from one of the wrestling video games. Like one of those creator wrestlers from 2K23. He is so fucking generic. And it's not even that much better with him as a heel, honestly. It's better than the Madcap shit. The fact he still is being called Madcap Moss is an atrocity. Maybe they were going to, and then Vince came back, who the fuck knows. But the fact he is still Madcap Moss is a joke. No pun intended. At least Nakamura squashed him. But we found out afterwards Nakamura's first feud back on SmackDown with Karrion Kross. I like that a lot, actually. Karrion has almost no heat. He's almost never on SmackDown nowadays. He hasn't done anything in months. He hasn't really done much at all since coming back. He lost to Drew. He had the feud with Rey, which was kind of not really furthered all too well. He's got this feud here. Maybe this will be a little bit different, hopefully. I do like the idea of them feuding, if only because Nakamura is so over. And he said in a .com exclusive video after the show, oh, well, I want world titles. That's not going to happen. Unless Nakamura is really rehabbed, I don't see him challenging for the world championship. The time to do Roman and Nakamura would have been a year ago, if not over a year ago. They missed their opportunity. It just doesn't... He's not even remotely a threat, unless they really rehab him, which I'm not getting the sense that they will, despite what we saw here. But Nakamura is still beloved. So Karrion working with someone that's so over, it should have helped. He was kind of getting over in the Drew feud. The problem was that in the follow-up, he just wasn't ever really on SmackDown. And Rey is also really over, and he should have benefited from working with him, but he lost. He lost to him ultimately in their first match and second match or whatever. In the second match, he did beat him, but I don't know. Karrion's not just on SmackDown enough to really benefit from working with these people. But anyway, I like the idea of the feud is what I'm trying to get at here. The main event, Solo Sikoa versus Matt Riddle. Really good match here. Solo wins with help from the Usos. That was a, pretty logical finish. The Usos and Solo put heat on the heels, brother. It's been happening a lot lately. It's just win after win for the Usos and Solo. Solo getting involved. Cheap finishes. Listen, it's getting heat on the heels. It is what it is. I am worried, though. They went off the air here with the Bloodline standing tall, stronger than ever, despite losing the tag team titles. I am worried the Usos will get the belts back in 2 weeks. I completely forgot that when they named that next pay-per-view, not Backlash, but the King and Queen of the Ring show, they renamed it to Night of Champions. Now, what was the gimmick for Night of Champions back in the day, or Clash of Champions, or Clash of the Champions, whatever the fuck you want to call it? The stipulation was every active championship must be defended. Well, Owens and Zayn are the current tag team champions. You might be wondering, unless you probably already know, which I'm sure you do, why is that a problem? Well, the answer is Owens and Zayn. I don't know if Owens has. Maybe aside from that first show, these two are never on the Saudi shows. Kevin Owens just doesn't want to be. And Sami Zayn, I don't think he even can be. I'm not even sure if he's allowed to be over there. Kevin Owens, I think it's a choice. Maybe they were on that first... They may have been on that first Saudi show 5 years ago. At least Kevin may have been. I don't remember. I feel like he was. Because I remember an exchange, I think, between him and Jericho in that match. Otherwise, I don't think he's ever been on the Saudi shows. So, if they're not going to be on that Saudi show, and they have to defend the tag titles, that's not good. Unless that's just the name, or they're not doing the gimmick anymore. I don't fucking know. But we'll see. I am worried the Usos will get the belts back. It doesn't negate the WrestleMania moment at all. At least they won. But I just think it's way too soon for them to be dropping the belts right back to the Usos, who have already beaten every fucking team on both of these brands. So I really hope that's not the case, but it will make that match more suspenseful in 2 weeks when we get it. So overall, quality edition of SmackDown this week. Enjoyed the show. Stuff is progressing. They're setting up stuff for next week, 2 weeks. Backlash. Nothing has been announced for Backlash yet, by the way. Backlash is in less than... it's in 3 weeks from tomorrow, so they do have some time. But we assume we're getting a 6-man tag team match with the Usos and Solo versus Riddle and Owens and Zayn. That just makes the most sense. As far as I know, Riddle and, Owens and Zayn have no issue wrestling in Puerto Rico, so they should be on that show. Otherwise, I'm not really sure what we're getting on that show. I know Io Sky became #1 contender to the Raw Women's Championship this past week. They didn't announce it for Backlash, though. So I don't even really know what's going on with that pay-per-view, but it should be a fun time. Obviously, Rey and Bad Bunny versus the Judgment Days, Dom and Damian. That just makes sense as well. But that also needs to be officially announced, hopefully in the next week or two. So good stuff from SmackDown this week. Hopefully they can keep the trend going of quality shows with Vince McMahon as far the fuck away from these shows as possible. Please. I'm enjoying the blue brand. Keep him the fuck away. That's all I ask. Thank you guys for checking out my review. I appreciate it. Be sure to like the video, drop a comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel for more daily content. Be sure to subscribe to the channel by hitting the bell button to be notified every time a new video goes up. Have an awesome one, guys. I'm Graham G. Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.